Marina. I'm handing over to our speaker, Marina Dzhashi, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Anne-Christine, and thank you so much, Karina, for the introduction. And thank you everyone who's joining us. It's really fantastic seeing so many participants coming in from so many different parts of the world. It's really great to know that this subject is interesting to so many people. And I would like to thank SIETAR Europa for hosting this event and for letting me participate in it. So I'll share my presentation with you now. I'll share the screen. And right, let's see. And Christine, I think it's saying here that I don't have the right to share the screen. If you could turn it back on, so I could share the presentation. Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Yes.
Now.
Do it now. Can you see my presentation now?
Yes, we can make it full screen. And
excellent. So I'm just enlarging it. Yes, doing it in the presenter's.
Fantastic. Looks good.
And we can start. So once again, thank you very much for joining this webinar called Modern Russia, Destroying Myths and Stereotypes. My name is Marina Dzhashi, and I'm a cross-cultural consultant based in Moscow. Let me just say a few words about myself and why I decided to do this webinar. Just like many of you, I work in the field of cross-cultural communication, and I feel very passionate about my work and also about sharing my knowledge and experience of living and working in different cultures. I've lived in the UK, US, India, and Japan. I'm based in Moscow, and I consult companies, both Russian and international. I'm also an invited lecturer at Russia's leading business schools, where I teach cross-cultural management. And last but not least, here's a project that I'm very, very proud of because this is my own creation. I produce and host an online radio show. I mean, it's audio-visual, so it's streamed on YouTube as well. So the show is on cross-cultural communication in business, and it's called International Business Ethics. Well, the show is in Russian, and it just turned 5 years in January. The show is about cross-cultural communication, subtleties of conducting business abroad. And I invite people who've lived, studied, and worked abroad, and the range of guests is quite wide. It could be students, could be heads of companies, could be ambassadors and CEOs. So basically anyone who can share their cultural experience with a broader audience, with a Russian audience. The reason why I decided to do this show, I at some point thought that it's very, very important to sit down and talk about cultural similarities and cultural differences in a nice, relaxed, and intelligent way, to talk openly about the things that concern us, to talk openly about some of the things that we may not like about other cultures. That's fine, as long as we keep an open dialogue. We all benefit from conversations like that. So that was the reason behind it. And good news is that not so long ago, and this is the first time I'm making this announcement, I decided to make a similar show in English. So do stay tuned. Very soon I'll be posting updates on how that is going. I've already interviewed a couple of people who live in Moscow, who've been living here for more than 20 years. And I'll be sharing some of what they think about their experience here with a wider audience with you. So I hope we'll stay in touch after this webinar, and you will be my audience when my show goes online in English. Well, before I go into some of the things that I prepared for you in my presentation, I just want to maybe on a lighthearted note, share with you some of the questions that I was asked when I traveled abroad, and some of the questions that I find sometimes a little, annoying, and I wonder why people ask me these questions. For instance, are you from Russia? But you don't look Russian. Do you drink vodka? No, I personally don't drink vodka. I don't drink any alcohol for the matter. What do you mean you don't drink vodka? What do you mean you don't drink any alcohol? If I'm outside and it's cold outside, I say that I'm cold, and people usually get surprised and say, but hey, you're from Russia. You're not supposed to be cold. Also, I used to hear something like, oh, you must be so different for you here. And I don't know, people were probably implying that Russia is so vastly different from the rest of the world that if you travel abroad and you find yourself in a different country, it must be so different and it must take a while for you to adjust to your new country, your new environment. Let me also share another funny story with you that also highlights the assumptions and stereotypes that we sometimes have of a culture that we haven't experienced, we haven't been to, or we may not even have encountered anyone from that culture, but we already have some preconceived ideas of what this culture may be about, of what living there might be like, etc. So this story happened to me many years ago. I'm sure things may have changed, but back then it was really funny. I came to the US with a delegation of Russians who were participating in a leadership program. It was a very, very interesting exchange program organized by the American side. And the people who were participating in the program, the Russian leaders, were representatives of many different professional sectors. There were doctors, engineers, heads of cities, administrations, and etc. You know, it was a very, very diverse group, diverse group of professionals. The purpose of the program was for the Russian side to learn how certain American institutions worked, and also exchange ideas and just have a good time. They're learning about American culture, and the receiving side Americans who were hosting us would also get exposure to Russians, and both sides would benefit from such a cultural exchange. So we were also placed with American host families, so we didn't live in hotels. We lived for the full cultural immersion, and we stayed with American families. There was a funny critical incident. That's why I'm sharing this story with you. Literally happened on the day of our arrival. Each American family, by the rules of the program, had to host 2 Russians. So my host family were a nice elderly couple who met us at the airport, me and the other Russian lady who was attached to this family. And when we arrived at their house, they showed us around their nice home. And then they showed us our bedroom. And it was a small bedroom with 1 double bed. That was the funniest bit. The other Russian lady and I looked at each other and we had a big question mark on our faces. So I decided to be brave and I asked my host family, I said, is this our bedroom? But there's only 1 bed here. And they look at us and say, yes, we would like you to sleep here and share this bed. And this other Russian lady that I just met literally at the airport, we looked at each other and said, look, we don't feel comfortable sharing this bedroom because we're not related. We are strangers to each other. It's okay if you cannot put us in separate rooms. Maybe we could go to a hotel, and we don't want to inconvenience you in any way. So it's perfectly fine. And, the moment we said that the issue was sorted, it turned out that there was a spare bedroom where this other lady could go, and we would be separated and sleeping in different bedrooms, but in the same house. And it was a really funny story, funny critical incident, as I call it. But to this day, I really wonder why that happened. And, I can't find any explanation as to why it happened. But maybe, I don't know, you could share your ideas in the chat. Maybe these lovely American people assumed that if we came from what was known to be the former Soviet Union, but the program, that was in 2001, so that was 20 years ago, quite some time ago. But nonetheless, if we came from the, what was known to be the former Soviet Union, our living conditions back home must be so unimpressive. And we shouldn't be complaining about sharing the same bedroom and the same bed, given that Russia is a collectivist culture after all. So that was my assumption. Maybe this is what they thought and assumed that would be fine with us. So their assumption was based on that stereotype. Somehow created maybe by the mainstream media or what they heard about Russia from other sources, because these people had never been to Russia before. They were just curious about Russia, just like most of you who gathered here today. So the lesson I've learned from this critical incident is that never make any assumptions about a different culture, especially if you don't know about it, if you don't know enough about it. Always treat other people the way you would want to be treated by others. So that was a funny critical incident that I thought I'd share with you before I go into some more details about the topic of the seminar and some facts about Russia, about the country that I think is important to highlight and say here. So Russia is the largest country in the world. It has a huge land mass, as you can see. It's located both in Europe and Asia. It's the only country, with the exception of Turkey, that has a natural border, and a part of it is in Europe and the other part of it is in Asia. And if you see this map, this red arrow here shows the border line between Europe and Asia. This is the natural border of the Ural Mountains. And most of Russia's territory is in Asia. But this territory is not densely populated. The territory that's densely populated is the Western, the European part of the country. So this is where most Russians live. Now, Russian climate zones range from the Arctic to the subtropics. So when you meet a Russian and you say, oh, it must be cold in Russia, it's not always the case. It is cold in winter, it is true. While I'm speaking to you, it's minus 20 degrees Celsius outside, it is freezing. And there has been a lot of snow lately. We had a record amount of snow recently. So it is true, it's cold in the winter, but it's just as hot as plus 35, sometimes 40 degrees Celsius, depending on where you are. Plus Siberia could be a hot region. Then Sochi that you see in the picture, the Black Sea resort, can get quite warm and quite hot. The picture that you see on the left is was sent to me by a friend of mine who is now traveling in the north with a group of people, and they want to catch the northern lights, the beautiful northern lights. It's very cold there as well, but she's taking this picture. She was taking this picture while wearing a red dress. What would you not do for a nice Instagram shot? But it also shows you how beautiful that place is. Russia is also a very ethnically diverse country, and it has more than 190 ethnic groups. These pictures here are also the pictures of my friends, and they show the Republic of Buryatia, which is in eastern Siberia. And you can see the colorful national costumes there. These are ethnic Buryats who live there. It's their native language, so they speak Russian. It's because it's a state language, and everyone in Russia obviously speak Russian. But also they speak their ethnic language. So there are a lot of, as I mentioned, 190 ethnic groups in Russia, and they preserve their culture and traditions. They speak their native languages. And what's interesting about them is that, you know, when you ask them about their nationality, they say that they're Russian, but the first thing that they mention is their ethnicity. So their ethnic group comes first, because these people are very, very proud of their cultural heritage. Another interesting fact about the country is that we have three religions, and we have representatives of people who are of Christian faith, that's Russian Orthodox, Islam, and Buddhism. In the pictures here, we have Christ the Savior Cathedral in Moscow, which is quite an interesting and dramatic history. If you're willing to explore that, you can do so. Then there's the mosque in Kazan in Tatarstan. There's another autonomous republic in Russia. And there's a Buddhist temple from Buryatia. So you can see that the country is not only ethnically diverse, it's also diverse as far as religion is concerned and faith. Now, modern Russians, who are they? Who are these people that live in such a huge territory, such an ethnically diverse place? You know, usually in my seminars and lectures, and when I talk to foreigners who want to know more about the country, I say that Russia is a country of 3 generations, basically 3 subcultures. We have the Soviet generation, then the post-Soviet generation, or those who were growing up and living in the 90s when the Soviet Union broke up. And we also call that period the turbulent 90s because it was a, let's say, not an easy time for the country in many, many ways, economically, socially, and otherwise. There were huge, as they say, tectonic shifts happening in the country. And the 3rd generation would be the generation that was born 20 years ago, 20 years old, or the Millennials. You know, these people represent different groups and they have different values. So when we all interact as society with each other, we sometimes have problems, conflicts, misunderstanding. Russians. And of course, when foreigners come to Russia, either for work or study, or business purposes.
Marina, I think you're breaking.
I usually advise people to keep that in mind, because it's very easy to stereotype, but in order to avoid stereotype and what's cultural better will certainly make your understanding of more accurate and devoid of stereotypes. Right.
Okay, I'm afraid we did lose Marina. Her connection broke. She's coming back in now. Hi, Marina, you're back. I think your connection, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm back. Can you hear me now? Is everything
Yes.
okay with my volume? Okay, cool. Sorry about that. Happens.
And you
I'm
need to share
back.
your screen again, please.
Okay, not a problem. We'll do that in a second. Okay. Yes, could you please restore my rights to share the screen?
Yes, sorry. There you go.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. So can you see the Hofstede slide? Yeah?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Sorry about that technical glitch, but I'm back. So yeah, let's look at these cultural dimensions. As you can see, Russia ranks very, very high on power distance, 93%. Then very low on individualism, 39%. Also, uncertainty avoidance is quite high here. So I just wanted to look at these dimensions because I think they are quite important. I mean, not to say that the others are not important, but these are quite actually demonstrative of what Russian culture may be like in corporate world, in social situations. But I have to say one thing though. This was done by Hofstede many, many years ago. And things have certainly changed. As I mentioned, the 3 generations of Russians who live here. So obviously they would be, if you, for example, measured the power distance among the people who are in their 20s and who work for international companies based in Russia, it would be a very different number, very different index than individualism. A huge question that I keep asking a lot of Russians, young Russians and not so young Russians: how would you describe modern Russia? Is it a collectivist culture, or is it tending to be more individualistic? My personal perception is that it's tending to be more individualistic, but in some ways it's still collective. Uncertainty avoidance is quite high, and Russia is a high context culture, although in some situations people like to be direct, and they will directly tell you what they think. But in many ways, it still is a very high context culture. So you literally have to, getting information may not be easy. It may not be on the surface, just like in Eastern cultures. Remember that the largest part of Russia is in Asia. You have to be able to read the air. So it happens here as well. Now, this study was done by Hofstede. Okay. I also want to share with you some of the findings that were done by the Russian venture company and the Institute for National Project Search and Consulting Center. What they did is they used Hofstede's dimensions to measure them in different regions of the country. So in this map, you see the Far East, Siberia, the Urals, Northern Russia, Central Russia. And it's interesting that inside the country, they found quite a diverse picture. So there was so much diversity in how people viewed power distance, where people were more individualistic and more collectivist. For example, the region of Far East had more potential for innovations and had entrepreneurial potential. There it was very, very, very strong. Also tendency to be individualistic. So there you go. You know, if you just look at some theory and get some of the theoretical ideas fixed in your mind and approach the country with those frameworks in mind, then you may be mistaken. So you just have to be, once again, I just want to highlight that you have to be flexible and realize that it's a very, very big country, and all these indexes that wise people tell you may not always be true when you deal with their reality. So you have to be flexible and sometimes take with a grain of salt what you hear and read about Russia. Now, what is it that I wanted to show you? There is one more thing that I wanted to show you that the Russian venture company discovered while conducting their research. They conducted their research among the group of people who are aged 18 to 30 years old, so a young generation. And they wanted to assess the potential for innovations in different parts of the country. So this is what the results that they came to. 80% of Russians like the idea of working for themselves. So they don't want to work for a big company, for a state company. They just want to be entrepreneurs. They want to set up their own business. That study, by the way, was conducted in 2018, 2019. So before the pandemic. I think the pandemic played a certain role, and maybe the responses would be different if this study was conducted, if this research was conducted now. Because a lot of companies closed during the pandemic, especially small businesses closed. But nonetheless, we're all hoping that things will eventually come back to normal. So 80% of the respondents, it wasn't a very big group, but then again, it's quite representative, answered that they want to work for themselves. So they wanted to have a larger degree of autonomy and freedom. Now, 86% aged 18 to 30 believe that new situations should not be avoided. Remember, according to Hofstede, Russia, again, ranked high on uncertainty avoidance. But the younger generation think differently, and they are quite happy to take risks and to do something that they consider exciting and new. But among the barriers to starting your own business, 74% of the respondents noted the deficit of financial resources, of the starting capital. The reason for that could be that in Russia, at the moment, the local investors did not have very much faith in local businesses. So they would rather support international companies, international startups. But maybe that situation will change. Now, 65% are mentioned administrative difficulties. So, there are some of the legal issues towards having your business, and that could be a problem for a lot of people, knowing about laws and regulations that change all the time, and could be quite challenging to keep up with all the changes. 63% noted lack of knowledge and skills. So that is also an important factor. So people go to business schools, some people learn by doing, but still there's a high percentage of people who actually realize that they need to learn more about how business works. And another interesting figure here, which I think for us as cross-culturalists and people who compare and study cultures, is the following. The 54% of Russians, of young Russians, think that if there is a risk of failure, there's no point in starting your own business. And for comparison, in the US, this figure is only 28%. For me, as someone who likes analyzing cultural differences from a psychological standpoint, that opens up a lot of, how shall I say it, a lot of opportunities for further research. Why is it like that? I personally think that the answer for that could be that there's not much tolerance for failure in the Russian culture today, unlike in America, where there's we are all familiar with the expression, if at first you don't succeed, try again. In fact, even at job interviews, the employers are interested in learning about your failure stories, because what is a failure? It's a success turned inside out. And basically, if you failed and you picked yourself up and created something really cool and great, it showed that you were able to rise above the difficult situations and failure. In Russia, though, failures are seen in a different light. So you have to be overperforming, you have to be an achiever, a high achiever, and people are afraid to talk about their failures, to talk about their mistakes. So that, I personally think, has to change. And I see a tendency to change that, because with the development of coaching and business psychology in this country, that issue has been looked at, and now there's more talk about changing the attitude towards mistakes, towards failure, and actually reviewing it. So let's hope for the better. Now, I mentioned earlier that I will interview foreigners, expatriates living and working in Russia about their experience of living and working here, and their advice to people who want to come here and who want to set up their companies and businesses here. Because in order to get a full picture, I would say unbiased picture of what Russia is today, you have to talk to different groups of people. And I think that interviewing the Russians who speak English would be interesting to get their say of how they see themselves in the international context and how they are received abroad. And on the other hand, the foreigners living in Russia and how they perceive the country and culture, how they transformed as a result of living here, and what misconceptions they had before coming here, and sharing it with a wider audience in English would also be beneficial for the people who want to know more about the country. Here on your screens now, you see the quotes from the interviews that I've already conducted. I haven't edited them. I mean, when I say edited, I just want to clean them up a little bit because we didn't have a live recording. It was on Zoom, and it was quite long. So I want to make this conversation shorter, but keep the highlights and the most important things. So I have so far, I've spoken to a Dutch businessman living in Russia. He's been living here for 24 years. And he said this to me, which I think is great. Whatever you say about Russia, the opposite is true as well. I think it's a fantastic quote because if you say something negative about the country, there's something positive in the country to balance it up, and the other way around. So if you are overly positive about something, there are examples of challenges here, because just like anywhere, just like everywhere, I would say people are people and they have problems. They have their own problems, and good and bad. So we all have it. And the Englishman that I talked to also who's been living in Russia for quite some time, for more than 20 years. It's interesting that the people that I've lined up for these conversations, they have been living in Russia for more than 20 years. So they're basically become locals, but still they still notice a lot of differences, because when you become a local, you stop noticing differences, but they still do. And it's fascinating to kind of dig deeper and to analyze what they think and how they have transformed the people around them, because that's another I think interesting issue for some of us as cross-culturalists to know about, because going back to modern Russians and what they want, people would rather work for an international company that's based in Russia than for like 100% Russian company. Again, for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, intolerance of failures, mistakes, and as a lot of Russians, young Russians note and say, in international companies, there's more importance of soft skills. So soft skills is something that a lot of Russians in professional context will have to develop. And this is something important to look at. But as I said, changes started happening, maybe not as fast as desirable, but people talk about them. And as long as people talk about what needs to be done and changed, it's always good. So the advice that the Englishman gave to his fellow countrymen and other expatriates living in Russia, or people wanting to travel to Russia, is expect the unexpected, which is beautiful. I mean, Russia definitely is a country that keeps you on your toes, and every day is a new experience. Every day is a new learning experience. But I think if you approach the country with an open mind, then you will learn a lot about the culture, about yourself. Because, when we travel abroad, when we go to a foreign country, it's important to keep an open mind about things. It's not always easy to adjust to certain things. I lived in Japan, and I lived in India, the UK, and the US, and in each country I had a different experience. And for each country, there's a different strategy of adjustment. But as long as I kept an open mind, as long as I didn't stereotype and try not to be judgmental, I was fine. Things are not good or bad, they are different. And if you keep that in mind, you'll be fine and you'll enjoy your cultural experience. So I think this is it from me for now. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them. I haven't checked the chat yet, and I'll be happy to answer your questions if you have any. And also, you can stay in touch with me. I have a YouTube channel where I post my views on cultural differences. There are different playlists there in Russian and in English, where I share my cultural stories and experiences, and my series of interviews that I mentioned here in this presentation will be posted there as well. So if you're interested, I'll be happy if you communicate with me via that media, YouTube or LinkedIn. We'll be happy to continue talking and answering your questions. So what do we got for now?
Thanks a lot, Marina. We got quite a few questions. Maybe going back to the very beginning of your presentation when you talked about this critical incident, funny critical incident with bad sharing. Would you think it's only related to culture, or maybe also the perception of students? Let me read out the question completely. Perhaps the older couple assumed those attending the program were university-age students and they wouldn't mind staying in the same room. Could there have been a different perception at play rather than one based on culture?
Okay, the thing is, we weren't students, and the receiving side, our hosts knew about us. They had the information about who's coming, and we weren't just sharing the same room; it was the same bed. So yeah, that was a bit odd, to say the least.
Yeah, I see. It's indeed something to ask a stranger to share that. Maybe coming back to the research you presented. First of all, people asked if you could share the link to the results of the Russian venture company so they can look at the research later on. And then first question in that regard, do you think the 80% of young people who want to start their own business are influenced by what they read, see online? People seem to be observing a similar trend in other countries. Yeah, so what's your perception on this?
Mm-hmm. Okay, certainly that generation's millennials, yeah, and there's so much written about them. They give so much headache to employers because people conduct, trainers conduct sessions on how to deal with millennials. What is it that they like? How to communicate with them? True, yes, a lot of that generation, as we say here, is born with a smartphone in their hand. And they're a lot more technological and technologically advanced. They get a lot of things done online. And speaking of, the digital transition, which we all had to adjust to our new digital normal during the pandemic, as far as Russian young people are concerned, they just adjusted very quickly. Literally, there was no adjustments to make because they already are so used to living online. So yeah, online is like the internet, and digital reality is their life.
Absolutely. And maybe dwelling on that point, risk aversion. Is the risk aversion and fear of failure related to avoiding shame from the community? In the sense, is Russia considered an honor versus a shame culture?
It depends on what part of Russia you come from, because I mentioned Siberia, republics like Buryatia or Tuva, and then there's Caucasus, there's Dagestan, there's Chechnya. So the honor-based culture is very, very strong there. It depends on what region of the country you look at. Here's an interesting question from Neil Payne, I think. How do Russians see foreigners, and what stereotypes do they have of Brits, Americans, and others? Thank you very much, Neil, for asking the question, because I have to be honest that the relationship with other countries, the West, Russia and the West, Western Russia, have been on a bumpy road. So yeah, Russians think that they are not liked abroad. They have this fear that if they go to work or study, they will not. They will have a very hostile reception there. Tell me if this is true or not. But the Englishman that I talked to during my interview that I mentioned here today said that we have to leave politics aside and people aside, because people are people no matter where they come from, and they will find common ground and, as we say, common language much faster than the politicians. So it's very important to separate people and politics.
All right. We had also a couple of questions on gender roles.
Mm-hmm.
What's your view on equality, diversity, and inclusion? And yeah, also relating that maybe to Hofstede's evaluation of Russia.
Okay. Well, Russia is an ethnically diverse country, and there are so many different people living here. Also in Moscow, if you come to Moscow or St. Petersburg, I mean, the biggest cities, two administrative centers in the western part of the country, you will notice that these places are very ethnically diverse as well. So we've got to remember the Soviet Union and the former republics of the Soviet Union that still share the cultural heritage, the same cultural heritage. People from those republics, now countries, still speak the Russian language, and they come to Moscow to work. A lot of them are migrant workers living here. And yes, I have to say that sometimes tensions do occur, but the more openly we talk about cultural differences and similarities, the more we will understand each other better. I think that some work has to be done in that direction as well. And just generally, cultural diversity and inclusion is a very, very big topic with so many different angles to look at it from. I, not so long ago, before the pandemic, worked with a company that wanted to hire international workforce. They wanted to hire engineers, designers from Italy, Turkey, Singapore, and they asked me, you know, what would be the best way to integrate these people into a Russian company. We started working together, and it was a very, very creative project. But then the pandemic interfered, and it never came to fruition. So hopefully, after a while, we'll pick that up, and that will be a very interesting, certainly project to work on, because well, I'll have to say this. I think it's important to say that there are international companies that are that have offices in Russia, but there are not that many foreigners working in Russia for different reasons. Yeah. But some Russian companies want to go abroad, want to open up branches overseas. So they would have to hire international personnel. So teams eventually would be more culturally diverse, more multicultural, which means there'll be work for people like us, cross-culturalists, who could share their knowledge and, you know, tell employers what needs to be done to integrate all these culturally diverse people together and make teams effective. Russians didn't have, like, historically, haven't had much experience, much exposure to other, like, you know, foreign cultures, international cultures. The only great example that I can give you of that exposure was the 2018 World Cup. You know, when the world came to Russia and Russia could show its hospitality to the world. That was really beautiful. And I enjoyed being here. I was in Moscow throughout this month, and it was fantastic. It was the true feast of interculturalism, friendship, and it was great. It was absolutely fantastic. So the more events like that we have, the better. And that's what people's diplomacy is all about. And people will learn about each other and put their stereotypes and misconceptions aside, and just have fun and enjoy each other's company.
Now we have talked a lot about a lot how Russians perceive foreigners. We have a question from one asking, how do all these different ethnic groups within Russia actually perceive each other? How the notions and tensions between them. Maybe you can comment on that also.
Sorry, Anne-Christine, can you repeat that? I didn't quite catch.
Okay, sorry. We're talking about how Russians perceive people from abroad and expats in Russia perceive Russians, but how about within Russia, because a lot of different ethnic groups, as you said. How about the perceptions of the different groups among each other, and are there tensions?
Yeah, I get it. That's a very good question too, because you know, when you have such an ethnically diverse country, tensions do arise, and the people that, you know, are my friends they are open-minded. They are quite friendly, and they're quite, I would say, they don't stereotype, and they come from different cultural backgrounds. They integrate very fast with each other. I mean, I personally am half Russian and half Georgian. My father is Georgian, and I've never had any problems adjusting to different cultures and accepting different cultures. But there are different people who are very, very different and who hold different views. Again, just like anywhere, and they need to be educated. I really hope that there'll be more sort of state initiatives to integrate more cultures and more educate them more about each other, so that there are less tensions, ethnic tensions, and problems between different groups.
Maybe talking about research into these different ethnic groups, would you perceive that the tendency of Russians not to speak about their mistakes hampers research in social sciences in Russia?
I think when researches are conducted, Russians are quite open. They actually talk openly about what concerns them, what problems they have. It's just that in a, say, business setting or in a company setting where a lot of factors are at play, you're afraid of what your employers may think or what your colleagues may think. So you always put your best foot forward, and that puts a lot of pressure on everyone in the group. But if there is one person who is brave enough to talk openly about mistakes and say it's okay, then tensions are diffused and people will just go, okay, let's talk about the things that we'd rather not talk about. But since the atmosphere is different, we could open up and discuss things. Another interesting thing in that regard is, I'll just give you another example, which I see as another interesting critical incident. Not so long ago, in fact, a couple of days ago, I went to one of the coffee shops where I haven't been for quite some time because of the pandemic and lockdowns and everything. So I went there after a long break. I wanted to have a cup of cappuccino, which I haven't had in a while. So the barista that made my coffee, she made such a nice cup of coffee. I don't know whether the coffee tasted so nice or the fact that I haven't had a cappuccino in a long while. But I said to her, look, this is really great cappuccino. Thank you so much. And what she said to me highlighted an interesting feature of a Russian character. Russians are not very generous with praise. And when she heard that from me, she said, oh, you should have said that, you should have said that. What if next time you come and I disappoint you? So that was a good example of how a lot of Russians are not very, very generous with praise, because they think that if you praise your employees or co-workers too much, they will become lazy and they will not perform. And this is ingrained in the culture, and I think that has to change. So people should be more generous with praise, and it'll motivate people even more, people that are around you. And another interesting thing is that in Russia, I heard that from a Russian colleague, bosses do not praise their employees. And if nobody says anything negative about your work, it means that you're doing great. That too has to change. I personally think that, and that too is linked to the fear of making a mistake, because you don't want to hear negative feedback from your boss. It's fine if you don't hear anything nice or if you don't get any praise, but God forbid you get something negative about what you're doing. So I think it's an interesting feature that could be explored further, of course.
Thanks a lot. Another question. What are your top 3 tips for working with old generation Russians and new generation Russians?
Wow. I see there's so many interesting questions here. Thank you very much. I won't be able to answer all of them, but please do stay in touch with me. Let me know, write to me, and I will answer them in correspondence. How to deal with the older generation? You know, that's a good question, because the older generation are the people who are the generation that probably struggled a lot. If you look at their history, the time periods that they lived through, they're quite tough. These are the people that are sometimes top professionals. I mean, not sometimes, but most of the time they're top professionals, but they are also very, very rigid. They may not be very flexible. So that's why it's not easy to work with them. And they don't change maybe as fast as you would like them to sometimes, because this is the generation that thinks that they know better, and you cannot teach them new tricks. How to deal with a younger generation? I just think that it's important to bring young and old together. It's important to talk about each other's experiences, to talk about life experience, professional experience. The more you talk openly with different groups, I think the more understanding there will be there, and you'll find some common ground and common denominator. I think like that. I mean, I'm sorry I didn't give you maybe a concrete answer, but I myself personally wonder a lot about that, how to integrate different generations together, how to make these groups work together.
Very interesting. Thanks a lot for the insights. Victoria has a question on what you said earlier. People are people and politics is politics.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that Russians believe that they actually influence their politics and politicians?
That's, I think to a certain extent, yes, to a certain extent, but I think another Russian cultural feature that's also quite fascinating to look at and explore from a psychological standpoint is how much responsibility you take for your actions, how much you can change. Because it used to be a collectivist culture, the responsibility for everything was shared. And more individualistic cultures and people in more individualistic cultures tend to take responsibility, personal responsibility for whatever they do or do not do. And in Russia, I personally think that people should take more individual responsibility and not spread responsibility to other members of society. If there is more personal responsibility, like believing in yourself, I think it starts from each individual. If you there's a lot we can do on our own, and a lot you can do to change environment around you, but you just have to keep going, keep working, and be proactive. But a lot of people, unfortunately, just think that they have to have an external motivator, external factor, somebody pushing them, somebody motivating them. So,
yes, absolutely.
Hope I answered the question.
Okay, switching to another question on actually Ukrainian and Russian culture. So what do you think, and your point of view, is the main difference in culture between Russians and Ukrainians? Do you believe that a revolution similar to Ukrainian Maidan would be possible in Russia?
Well, the thing is, I'd like to focus on cultural issues and not to go into the political side of things, because obviously we could agree to disagree on many things here, and this is the subject that, again, is huge, and it's impossible to answer in the couple of minutes that left here. But Russians and Ukrainians culturally have a lot in common, and historically, if you just look at history, like centuries back, certainly a fascinating time period. And hopefully there will be peace between the two sooner rather than later.
All right, maybe not talking about politics, but history. History is always important, says Joe, more so in Russia than anywhere. So would you agree that outsiders show an awareness of Russian history, particularly regarding the revolution in World War II? What's your perception of that?
Absolutely. I think if people read history and more about that specific period, that would only broaden their horizons about Russia. The period, the Great Patriotic War, as it's called in Russia, that started in 1941 and ended in 1945 here, part of the Second World War that started in 1939, is a very, very huge part of history. And Russia lost more than 20, around, if I'm not mistaken, 27 million people in that war. So there's every family or every second family that lost a family member. So for the Russian people, that war is a huge, huge, huge historic event that people feel very strongly about, and they cherish their memories and their loved ones who they lost. I'm sure you may have heard of the initiative called the Eternal Regiment. On the 9th of May, we celebrate Victory Day. Because of the time difference, in Europe, you celebrate V-Day on the 8th of May, we celebrate on the 9th. And a lot of veterans and families who had somebody who fought in the war, they walk around Moscow holding the portraits of their relatives who died in the war, or relatives who participated in the war. So it's a very, very emotional day for a lot of people, and a day of remembrance. So yeah, and that too is a very interesting part of history. There are a lot of books written about that, and a lot of sources that come to light even now, 75 years later. So true, there's a lot to learn from that as well, and about that.
All right, so we have 1 minute left. We're coming towards the end of the session. Thank you so much, Marina, for all your insights and all the learnings you shared with us today. Yes, feel free to reach out to Marina and stay in touch with her. And now that you leave the meeting, we will see the little feedback questionnaire. We would be very thankful if you could fill that out so we can keep improving and making our events better for you. And I also would like to announce our next webinar taking place in March, March 17th, which will be on negotiating across cultures. And yes, with this, I can only say thank you, Marina. It was a very interesting session.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for participating, and wishing you all a great evening.
Thank you very much, and Christine. Thank you very much, everyone, for your questions. We only had 1 hour and went by very, very fast. So do stay in touch with me. Do subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'll be very happy to communicate with you. Let me know what you think of the stories that I post there. And stay tuned for my English language series on the Russian culture and expatriates living in Russia. Thank you very much.